Since 1996, the Grammys have given out an award for the best rap album, and while in some years they have gotten it right, a lot of times they have been extremely wrong. So today, we're gonna find out just how horrible the Grammys have been as we rank every Grammy-winning rap album from worst to best, and if you are ready to see the highs and lows from music's biggest award show. Let's waste no time and let's get right into it.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit that I have ever heard.
Now, kicking off this list in last place, at number 29, we got the 2019 Best Rap Album winner with Invasion of Privacy by Cardi B, and to this day, this is not just one of the worst picks the Grammys have ever given to win anything, but it's truly one of the worst in all of award show history, especially when you consider the other phenomenal albums it was up against, like Travis Scott's Astroworld, Pusha T's Daytona, and Mac Miller's Swimming. Now, when it comes to Invasion of Privacy, all this album is your run-of-the-mill late 2010s pop rap album, and while this record does have its fair share of massive hits, that's undeniable. There is a big difference between being commercially successful and being a truly great piece of music. In a time where hip-hop was in a renaissance artistically, whether because of the mastery lyricism from Pusha T, or the otherworldly psychedelic experiences from Travis Scott, or the emotional vulnerability that Mac Miller was able to show and touch lives with, the album selected over all of these and so many others represented none of hip-hop's greatest accomplishments at the time, and instead showcased the genre at its most predictable and complacent. I'm sorry, Cardi B is just not an interesting enough rapper to make an entire album compelling, as the moments where she sounds like a real human are about as scarce as it gets, and for the majority of this thing, she's just boasting about her looks or talking down to everybody, and with her agitating delivery and elementary level songwriting, she's doing the most boring and overplayed out things a rapper can do on a song in the most boring and painstaking way possible. So overall, for being a record that while being massively successful commercially had absolutely no right even being mentioned for this type of award, Invasion of Privacy is the worst album to win a Grammy, and I think it's undisputed. Now, if there is any album that you can say is worse than Invasion of Privacy, it would definitely be the record at our number 28 spot, which is Macklemore and Ryan Lewis's The Heist. Now, looking at this album, very similar to Invasion of Privacy, this record took the commercial music world by absolute storm by catering to the pop rap trends of the time, and it dominated because of that, but being nominated alongside rappers like Drake and Jay-Z and albums like Kanye West's Yeezus and Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid Mad City, The Heist didn't just have absolutely no place being mentioned alongside albums that we have now seen become classics and change the artistic landscape of hip-hop and music, but it should have never won over them either. I don't know how the Grammys messed up this bad. This album just doesn't do a single thing remarkably memorable outside of having major hits like Thrift Shop and Can't Hold Us, and when you look at it from that angle, it almost seems like they just voted on this category based on which record had the biggest singles. Macklemore's performance just feels like a musical sin, as he puts together the most cliche bars you can possibly think of, and they are decorated within this overdramatic production that feels like it's more fitted for a Chevy commercial or something than an actual serious rap album. So overall with The Heist, while on the surface it appears to be so much more than it is between Macklemore's wannabe big brain rapping and its era-defining hits, in actuality, all it ever did was water down everything that defines a great hip-hop project and presents it in a way that would only impress people who don't appreciate a Kendrick Lamar or a Kanye West. So honestly, when you look at it winning the best rap album, despite how horrible of a pick it is, I guess it's really not that surprising considering the type of people that vote for these awards. Now on to number 27, we are past seeing album winners that are just straight out horrible and have no place winning anything, and instead, we just got some really confusing picks, and at this spot we got Ludacris's Release Therapy, and again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is a bad album, but is this really the best from its time? Now, despite this record being massively successful commercially again, it really has no other merit to stand on to be a best rap album winner, especially considering that it was up against some of the most complex and well-written rap albums of its time, like Lupe Fiasco's Food and Liquor, and The Roots' heavily underrated Game Theory, and even aside from these records, it was up against Pharrell's In My Mind and T.I.'s King, which were projects that are way more compelling experiences and were just as nearly culturally relevant. Now, beyond the confusing win that Ludacris got with this project in comparison to its competition, when you look at Release Therapy for what it actually is, especially in a modern era, it's kind of a mediocre listen overall, as it's dominated by annoying club bangers that have aged like milk, and the only thing that's aged worse than the tired production and formula of so many of these songs are some of Luda's punchlines, which are just horrible. It's honestly frustrating because there are a good amount of great songs on this project that show off such a vulnerable and ambitious side to Ludacris, but they are dragged down by so many tracks that seem like they were mandated to be on a record like this to fit the trends of the time. So overall, while Release Therapy may have been a decent pick for best rap album at the time, as this album has aged and all of the trends it relied on with it, it just stands out as one of the weakest and most dated best rap album winners that the Grammys have ever selected. Now, coming in at number 26, we got the first ever winner of the Best Rap Album Award from all the way back in 1996 with Naughty by Nature's Poverty's Paradise. And don't get me wrong, I don't think this album is bad, but when we look at it being nominated against records that changed hip-hop forever like Tupac's Me Against the World, it just seems confusing why you would pick an album that is just so okay in comparison. Now, if you listen to this album, you're definitely not gonna hate it, and if you like 90s East Coast hip-hop, I'd even tell you it's worth a spin, but to that point, this album just exists in the herd of solid records that were a part of this movement and doesn't stand out as something that is particularly great or era-defining. From the bars to the flows to the boom-bap beats, everything on this album is written and curated in a way that is super well done. But overall, it just fails to blow you away and leave you with that long-lasting impression that not just the best boom bap and East Coast rap albums from even this same year did, but it fails to leave a mark on the rap world like an album that is winning such a coveted award is supposed to. So overall, for Poverty's Paradise being a record that is just solid, I can't put it any higher than this. Now, coming in at number 25, we got Eminem's Recovery, and if you are an M stan, calm down and just hear me out for a second. Now, as I've already said, the albums at this point on the list are not bad, but they just don't have the makings to take the crown as the best rap album from a respective year, and with Recovery, this is its exact problem. Don't get me wrong, this project had some of the best hits of the 2010s period with Not Afraid, Love the Way You Lie, and No Love, but as a complete listening experience, this is nowhere near as good as Eminem's earlier albums, and it really only won because it was attached to a superstar as big as Eminem's name in the first place. So overall, that's all I really have to say about this record. It's a solid album, but if we are being real, if it was made from any other artist that wasn't named Eminem, it would have not taken home this Grammy. Now, coming in at number 24, we got No Way Out by Puff Daddy and the Family, and what's good about this album is that most of it is still enjoyable because Puff Daddy didn't even write his own raps or contribute anything of quality to the record, and the only reason it was ever good in the first place was because of the reoccurring guest appearances from the likes of Biggie, Jay-Z, Busta Rhymes, and so many other gifted MCs and artists. So with No Way Out, while I do think this record is way too messy and has way too much Puff Daddy to ever actually be deserving of a Best Rap Album award, its saving grace are the collaborations and performances from the rest of the Bad Boy crew and their affiliates that just steal the show time and time again. With this record releasing after the passing of the late Biggie Smalls, this album gave us the last real performances that Big was ready to release and show the world, and this just makes tracks like Victory and Young G's hit all the harder as we hear a version of Big that is more mature, focused, and tenacious than we would ever see. So all in all, if you want to listen to a record that in some ways kind of feels like a spiritual successor to Life After Death, No Way Out is still a decent listen, and for this reason, it's at the number 24 spot. Now coming in at number 23, we got the 2010 Best Rap Album winner with Eminem's Relapse, and while personally I do enjoy this album and appreciate the eerie and dark direction Eminem took this entire experience in, let's be real, the only reason this album won this award is because it was attached to Eminem's name, because even the most loyal of M fans would admit that this album came nowhere near the quality of its predecessors. So while Relapse is good, it's definitely not on the level of some of the better albums from Eminem on this list, and for this reason, it's at number 23. And at number 22, we got the 1999 Best Rap Album winner with Jay-Z's Hard Knock Life Volume 2, and while this is Jay's best-selling album and the only record of his to ever take home this award, if you're an old head, brace yourselves because you're gonna hate what I have to say, but when we look at this album 25 years separated from its release, I think it's aged pretty horribly for a Jay-Z Jay-Z album, and while it is still decent, I think it's one of Jay-Z's weakest records. Now, I used to love this album years ago, don't get me wrong, but going back to it today, most of the songs just feel so dated as it relies so much on the trends of the time that when we look at it all these years separated from the time it dropped, outside of a few highlights, a lot of the album just feels super inauthentic to the Jay-Z he was before this album and the artist he would blossom into following it. So while Volume 2 was an album that absolutely took the world by storm in 1998, it's kind of the problem with it as it was so reliant on what's going on around it in the time that it dropped that when you listen to it today, it just feels so dated and uncharacteristically dull compared to what else Jay-Z has done. Now moving on to number 21, we are looking at a tier of records that, while still not worthy of winning the best rap album based on their pure musical merit in my eyes, are still solid records, and right outside of the top 20, we got Nas's King's Disease, and while I think that other records that Nas released during his phenomenal run this decade with Hit Boy would go on to surpass this album, this is the record that really changed the tone for Nas's music as it started it all and showed the world that despite being in the rap game for nearly 30 years, Nas still has so much to offer. Listening to King's Disease feels like sipping on a glass of fine wine, and what makes this project especially unique in the series is that alongside all of the heightened wisdom Nas is instilling into track after track, he's also rapping with a fire lit under him as we see him trying to prove to us that his music can thrive in the modern era, and this is especially seen through the cross-generation collabs on this record, which all end up being surprisingly unique and refreshing. Now, with all this said, while King's Disease is a really good record that achieves something not many ever have in terms of rightfully evolving an aging artist into a new era, I don't think it's quite deserving of the best rap album title, as even some of the projects it was up against, like Freddie Gibbs and the Alchemist collab album Alfredo, were significantly better, and when you compare this project to so many other albums that have taken this award home in the past, it just doesn't reach the heights or have the same impact that defines an album that is supposed to represent the best hip-hop has to offer outside of giving Nas his first Grammy after him being historically snubbed from the award show for so many years. So for these reasons, King's Disease is at number 21 on this list. Now cracking the top 20, we got the 2015 winner for Best Rap Album with the Marshall Mathers LP2, and while I think this album is the very best work Eminem has had to offer since his earlier records, and it has some genuinely amazing and career-defining performances, let's be real, we all know this record took home Best Rap Album because it is from Eminem, and that's all I have to say about this. So again, the Marshall Mathers LP2 is a really good album, do not get me wrong, but on a list like this, I can't put it any higher than the number 20 spot because it simply doesn't have anything to stand on outside of it being another record from arguably the most successful rapper to ever live. Now moving on to number 19. We are now at a point in this list where I think that all of the following albums had a legit case for being named the best hip-hop record of their respective year, and while that doesn't mean I think they are the best from that respective year, it does mean that I think they're quality enough experiences to at least compete for that title, and at this spot, we have one of the most surprising records to ever win a Grammy with Chance the Rapper's Coloring Book, and when it comes to this record, aside from being the first and only mixtape to ever win a Grammy, this is one of the most fun projects that you will ever listen to, not just on this list, but really in all of hip-hop. Listening to Coloring Book makes it feel like there is just a beam of light shining right down on you with its infectious positive energy, star-studded performances, and of course, the one-of-a-kind charismatic bravado that Chance the Rapper brings. There are just so many feel-good moments on this record that it really makes it impossible to not just get lost in the absolutely beautiful music world that Chance put together on this record, and for these reasons, it's respectably at the number 19 spot. Now coming in at number 18 on this list, we got the classic album that started one of the craziest runs in hip-hop history with Eminem's Slim Shady LP, and while I've been somewhat critical of all of Eminem's records that have won Best Rap Album before this point on the list, I could safely say this record 100% deserves to be here, as it is to this day one of the most surreal experiences you can find in all of the rap world. The horrifying yet hilarious character Eminem plays on this record makes for one of the most memorable performances we have ever seen in the genre, and despite how insane Eminem gets with some of the song concepts and lyrics on the record, he's able to ground everything and plant a seed that leaves you infinitely interested in what is going on to make a man write tracks that, while can be so witty and playful, have these eerie and disturbed tones that tell us that the man behind all of this clearly has a lot more of a serious story to tell. Now, I'm not going to waste any more time talking about this project because at this point there is not much else that hasn't been said, but for these reasons, the Slim Shady LP is an amazing record and it is number 18 on this list. And at number 17, we got the 2024 Best Rap Album winner with Killer Mike's Michael, and I know a lot of people are livid about this because it won over Travis Scott's Utopia, and while I do think Utopia is a better project, don't make the Recording Academy's voting decision turn you against what is one of the best traditionally made rap albums that the genre has seen in quite a long time. Just to give you some context, I had Michael at number 2 on my 2023 Album of the Year list, only under Travis Scott's Utopia, and the reason why this is because the record embodies every single component that defines a great album and excels in using them to create an experience that is so unique and poignant. Being in the rap game for over 20 years at this point, Killer Mike has been honing his skills as a writer and a storyteller for decades, and we see the payoff to his dedication of this craft here as he creates a record that encompasses his lifetime worth of experiences. The way he's able to translate his pain and love through his words and commanding voice truly make for a performance that you don't see often in modern hip-hop, and making this record even better. The features are amazing. I mean, you got Andre 3000, Future, and Young Thug all featured on the same project. That should tell you everything you need to know. So overall, I get it's annoying that Utopia didn't win the Best Rap Album, but please, if you like this thing called rap music, don't let your frustration with the Grammys take away from enjoying a record as well polished and powerful as Killer Mike's Michael. Now, coming in at number 16, we got Drake with his massive 2013 Best Album winner, Take Care, and when it comes to this iconic and decade-defining project, this is such a versatile album that despite featuring Drake literally going from crying on songs to rapping more passionately than we have ever really seen it, manages to all feel so cohesive, and this is really a sentiment to the way Drake made albums at this time. Now, in hindsight, with all of the garbage that Drake has released in modern times, it's hard to remember that he could put together an entire experience with so much thought, but Take Care is really made with a level of precision and depth that mainstream albums are just not anymore. From hits to deep cuts to Drake's own performances, which are enriched by the star power of the absolute A-list of featured guests. This record has so many moving pieces that manage to all enhance one another, and in an era where Drake himself has forgotten how to balance his albums like these and not just use features to market the album or hits to make them go viral. Listening back to Take Care all these years later really makes it feel like artists making projects that can have wide mainstream success yet also be genuinely great pieces of music has become a lost and even a dead art. So for these reasons, and for Take Care being the ultimate Drake project that rightfully deserved its Best Rap Album win, it's number 16 on this list. Now, moving into the top 15, we are now at a point in this list where all of these albums are genuinely amazing and are in a lot of people's top 10s or top 5s, so this is where the ranking got really challenging. But at number 15, we got the Carter 3, and when it comes to this album, to this day, I don't know if there is a more entertaining rap album than this. Lil Wayne raps like an alien on this entire project with a demeanor and swagger that you can't even translate the magic of into words. From era-defining hits to some of the most creative lyrical performances of the entire century. The Carter 3 is one of those records that completely redefined what a rapper can do and made for one of the most impressive displays of skill that not just hip-hop, but any genre of music has ever seen, and for these reasons, it's number 15 on this list. And at number 14, we got the iconic Eminem Show, and when it comes to the third act in the trilogy of Eminem's first 3 major label albums, I don't think there was a better way to end off one of the greatest runs in music history than this. Now, with an album like the Eminem Show, it's important to remember that at the time of this record's release, Eminem was the absolute biggest thing in music, and while he had millions of fans, he was also the target of so much public ridicule and controversy in a way that few artists ever were, and M took all of this and created a body of work that embodied the chaos and turbulence surrounding his entire life, and by embracing this storm of emotion and attention, he was able to give us something unforgettable. From the presentation of this album, which is designed to feel so important and impactful from the very moment where we hear the curtains open in the intro to when we hear them shut close, to the intensity that's conveyed through so many of the instrumentals, this entire album plays like a once-in-a-lifetime experience that may not be Eminem's very best album, but is sure the most important when we look at everything he stands for. This is why the record thrives by having tracks that wreak sheer havoc and spark more controversy, yet also songs that show Eminem's love for his daughter and his fears and passions as a human. With these different aspects coexisting with each other, it creates a picture that doesn't just show us what makes Eminem the rapper so special in the first place, but it shows what makes him such a compelling artist beyond the spectacle that he creates through all of the attention that he garnered at this time. The Eminem Show builds so well both stylistically, but more importantly narratively, on the groundwork of the Slim Shady and Marshall Mathers LPs, as it shows us the fully evolved version of Eminem that he has been building to for an entire series of projects. So all in all, for being an amazing record that embodies everything that made prime Eminem such a force in the rap world, the Eminem Show is at number 14 on this list. And at number 13, we somehow got an even better finale to an iconic trilogy of records with Kanye West's Graduation, and with an album like this, do I really have to say anything about it? Graduation is merely the ultimate victory lap project, as we see Kanye West deliver one of the most triumphant performances not just in hip-hop, but in all of music history. The electric-infused soundscape makes this album sound like it's from the future even all of these years after its release, and Kanye's performances are all so inspiring as you just hear this infectious confidence and bravado just power into your ears in a manner that not a single other artist dead or alive can replicate. Now, if it wasn't for the absolute disgrace of Drunken Hot Girls, this album would be borderline perfect, but as it stands, for being hip-hop's quintessential celebration album, Graduation is still at this point on the list. And at number 12, I know this is where I'm gonna piss a lot of people off, but before you run to the comments telling me how the 3 albums above this are better, just hear me out. In this spot, we got the 2022 Best Rap Album with Tyler, the Creator's Call Me If You Get Lost, and when it comes to everything that I just praised the last 3 albums for being in terms of having one-of-a-kind third acts to iconic series that just display the artist's talent and ethos in the very prime of their careers in a manner that is just unrivaled. Call Me If You Get Lost does all of this just a little bit better than the other records. Now, while the Carter 3, the Eminem Show, and Graduation, for how great they are, all come with slight flaws and even a few weak songs across the board, Call Me If You Get Lost is a record that does not waste a single second, and beyond this, maximizes its time to create one of the most immersive and thrilling albums ever, even compared to this elite competition. Now, what's so insane about how otherworldly of a listen Call Me If You Get Lost is the fact that Tyler has just about as many moving parts as you possibly can on an album, all functioning at once. This is a record that is virtually a Gangsta Grillz album with DJ Drama narrating it, and with features ranging from Lil Wayne to NBA Youngboy. It doesn't even make sense how this album can feel so polished and well crafted, as it's doing so many different things at the same time. Tyler's able to transition from rapping over a Griselda beat to then making a trap song to then going full on R&B, all to then making an 8-minute track of straight lyrical storytelling in the blink of an eye, and this is just a display of mastery from an artist that is purely unreal. While the albums right below this project feature some of the most gifted rappers of all time, mastering the signature skills and traits that define them at the height of their careers. Call Me If You Get Lost shows Tyler mastering every aspect of hip-hop artistry and so much more in a way that is just jaw-dropping, and that's why it's number 12 on this list. And right outside of the top 10, we got the 2018 winner for Best Rap Album with Kendrick Lamar's Damn. Now with Damn, I find that its most defining trait is just how dynamic of a record that it is. While we have seen some massive commercial albums also be incredible bodies of work over the years, I don't think there is another project on this list that is able to put together an experience that is so rich and complex narratively, yet is so accessible to any type of music listener. From the many hits on this album to the crazy layered storytelling tracks, which feature some of Kendrick Lamar's most awe-inducing, jaw-dropping material, Damn offers so much to listeners as it balances making conscious and commercial hip-hop blend so well together. So looking at Damn in its entirety, when we look at albums that usually win these awards, while most of them sold incredibly well and are beyond exciting experiences, there's only a few albums that we will see later that manage to be even as close to as thought-provoking as Damn, and for this reason, it's taking the number 11 spot. Now finally we are in the top 10, and we are now looking at the very best albums to ever take home Best Rap Album at the Grammys, and in this spot, we got the only rap album to ever take home the General Album of the Year as well, with Outkast Diamond LP's Speaker Box The Love Below. Now with Outkast's final mainline studio album, in their tradition tradition of always pushing music to the limits of what it can be. They decided to make this record a massive double LP that features a solo album from Big Boi in Speakerboxxx and one from Andre in The Love Below, and despite the group splitting up for most of the record and creating their own distinct musical worlds, it absolutely worked and ended up ultimately becoming their most successful album, and rightfully so. From the brash and funky Speakerboxxx, which really allowed Big Boi to cater an experience to his buttery flow and smooth vocals in a way that we had never really seen, to The Love Below, which pushed Andre 3000 to infuse pop, soul, hip-hop, and so much else into one of the most creative albums that I have ever heard in my life, by splitting up and letting their individual creative spirits run loose. Outkast was able to create an experience that to this day there has been absolutely nothing else like. So for Outkast finding new ways to elevate the album structure as a whole, Speakerboxxx The Love Below is in the top 10 of this list. And at number 9, we got Eminem's Marshall Mathers LP, and while I have talked about 5 other Eminem albums on this list and have had some pretty differing feelings on all of them, this is the album that no matter what, stands proud and tall as his magnum opus. While the Slim Shady LP is more insane than this album and the Eminem Show is more mature and refined, the middle act in this legendary album saga takes the best of both of these worlds, as Eminem delivered one of the most controversial and scrutinized but beloved and impactful performances from any rapper ever. There are just so many moments on this album that leave you in pure shock, and not just because the things Marshall Mathers is saying are controversial just to be controversial, but also because of the way M was able to critique and respond to the mass audiences who were trying to blame the world's problems on his music. Between the strength of Eminem's pen and subject matter, and also the atmosphere of this album that oftentimes feels so ominous and rage-filled, outside of the awful skit where we have to listen to somebody do something that I can't say on YouTube, all of these other factors come together to create a near-perfect experience. So for all of these reasons, the Marshall Mathers LP is number 9 on this list. And coming in at number 8, we got an album that redefined how a lot of people look at hip-hop, with Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Now with this album, I have praised it enough in other videos, so I don't think I have to waste too much time, but just to highlight why I think this record is so amazing, is because this LP truly stands in a league that few have ever even dared to walk into, as Kendrick Lamar deconstructs himself in a way that is so honest and raw that it leaves you gripping onto every word of its storytelling and every bit of its emotion. In an era where society loves idolizing public figures and celebrities, it's so refreshing to hear somebody who was always put on a pedestal by rap fans show us that he is not the man who we think he is, and actually embrace it, ultimately by highlighting the idea that the only way to love ourselves is to accept who we are. And I can really go more into depth, but I'm gonna leave it here. So for being an album that really helps destroy the confines of how a rapper can express themselves, and doing it in near flawless fashion, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is taking the number 8 spot on this list. And at the number 7 spot, we got an all-time classic with Kanye West's debut album, The College Dropout. And when we look at the legendary catalog of Ye, while he has surpassed his original project in terms of spectacle and out-of-the-box creativity, what he's never been able to replicate from this record is the sheer hunger and drive to be great that makes this one of the most charming albums that I have ever heard in my life. From the sped-up soul samples that give this record a sonic texture that is so distinct to this era of hip-hop and really the mind of Kanye, to Kanye's own rapping, which features most of his best lyrical performances to this date. Despite this album being 20 years old, the emotions that flare through it make it feel just as inspiring and moving today as it was on the day it dropped. Hearing Kanye prove himself to the world is captivating in ways that most albums are just never able to be, and by listening to Ye on this record and hearing about all of his hardships and struggles, but more importantly how he overcame them and was able to build his life to the best it can be despite everything the world threw at him. Overall, it makes listening to this album from start to finish not just feel rewarding, but it simultaneously pushes anybody listening to be their best selves as well. So for being such a meaningful musical experience that embodies the very best of what hip-hop is, College Dropout is number 7 on this list. Now, right outside of the top 5, we got the 1997 winner for Best Rap Album with the legendary record from the one and only Fugees trio, The Score. And when it comes to group rap albums, there is nothing that gives us an experience quite like this. From the fusion of rapping and singing to the production that makes this record feel like a frickin' movie with how cinematic it all feels. I don't know how else to say it, but they just don't make albums like this anymore. The trio of Lauryn Hill, Pras, and Wyclef Jean all complement complement each other so well between their different vocal capabilities, mic presences, and writing styles, which is really a strength of the group, as there is never really a dull moment throughout this entire LP. Now, when you look at this album and everything it accomplishes, the only way you can even describe it is by calling it pure and utter musical magic. So if you haven't ever heard this album, please do yourself the favor and check it out. And for being one of the most compelling, well-made, and dynamic pieces of music ever recorded, the score is at number 6 on this list. And cracking the top 5, we got a record that isn't really a rap album, but still won the award because the Grammys don't know how to categorize music, with Tyler the Creator's IGOR, and wow. Even after being out for almost 5 years, it still amazes me how an album like IGOR even exists, as it just pushes not just what a rapper can do way beyond its limits, but shows artists in all genres and mediums that the only thing that should confine them are their own visions. IGOR is the product of Tyler the Creator taking everything he knew as an artist, throwing it out the window, and just creating lawlessly, and ultimately the product is one of the most beautiful albums I have ever listened to. I am not ashamed to admit that this record has moved me to tears. Tyler the Creator infuses even more genres and styles than Andre 3000 did on The Love Below to not just create a record that is a masterful display in aesthetics, but also a record so brilliant that it's able to use both its songwriting and instrumentation to create a narrative-driven concept album that tells the story of a man who Tyler is rapping from the perspective of in the midst of a love triangle. Now, the way Tyler explores the high points and hardships of love and reflects the most complicated emotion known to man through the one-of-a-kind dreamlike soundscape makes this album just feel so ethereal on your ears. So all in all, while calling IGOR a rap album puts it in a box that doesn't really let its creative wings fly for themselves, it is not just one of the best albums to ever win this award, but it is truly one of the greatest creative achievements from a hip-hop artist ever. And now, at the Mount Rushmore, we got Kanye West's sophomore album, Late Registration, and out of all of Kanye's original 3 albums, it's the middle act that stands out most to me, as it just refines and improves so much of what The College Dropout got right, and this really says a lot considering what I said about that album. Now, where The College Dropout was Kanye West's proof of concept that he can be a big-time rapper in the industry, Late Registration is the actualized product of an artist honing their skills and putting them into something that will forever stand the test of time. Kanye is able to retain so much of the soulful feel and common man attitude that made him so relatable on his debut album, and is able to grow in both of these aspects as he tells more personal stories and decorates the score with some jazz influence as well. This jazzy soundscape especially makes this thing feel picture perfect just from when you hear the first note of each instrumental, but what makes Late Registration so strong to me is that at every corner it takes, despite how pristine it may sound, Kanye is trying to show us the exact opposite of perfection. What's even more amazing about this is that Kanye does this by not beating himself down, but just by showing us his reality. From all the troubles him and his mother faced growing up to the loss of relatives like his grandmother, Kanye paints us a picture here that is more alive and real than most other artistic statements ever are, and this is because of the way he is able to translate the turbulence of human emotions and life so well into this entire experience. Whether this is joy or pain, resistance or temptation, over everything else, Kanye West's understanding of what defines himself and all other people is what makes this album so compelling, and for these reasons, Late Registration has made it to the Mount Rushmore on this list. And cracking the top 3, we got the 2002 Best Rap Album recipient with Outkast, Stankonia, and while Speakerboxxx The Love Below showed us how good Andre 3000 and Big Boi can be individually, Stankonia still serves to show us that this combination is at their best when they are working alongside one another, as this record is one of the most ambitious albums that I have ever heard. Stankonia is really just one of those albums that feels so surreal to listen to from start to finish. This is because there is not a single song that sounds quite like the last, yet the experience is all intertwined through the whimsical creativity of Outkast, and this makes the record truly hypnotizing to your ears. Stankonia is able to do such a convincing job at creating another dimension, all because of the level Andre and Big Boi were at, both in terms of their own skills, but also in terms of how they understood each other at the time. Big Boi's smooth player attitude was the perfect foil to the unpredictability of Andre 3000, and no matter what the two are rapping about here, they find ways to enhance each other's performances in a manner that most other collaborators never even come announce close to. Whether this involves the duo teaming up to make a fast-paced, high-energy banger like B.O.B. or a soft, remorseful ballad about the failures of marriage in Miss Jackson, Outkast is not just able to step into any sort of territory to achieve greatness on this record, but they end up mastering everything they are involved with here. I have a hard time truly putting this all into words because of how all over the place this album is in the best way possible, but overall, for being one of the most creatively brilliant albums that has ever been released in the history of recorded music, Stankonia has made it to the top 3 of this list. And now, at number 2, we got one of the best albums of all time with Kanye West's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and this record is just phenomenal. I don't know how else to say it. The highs Kanye reaches on this record are some of the greatest peaks that any musician has ever made, and I think this is something that will not change till the end of time. Every single thing you can want, not just in a rap album, but in a piece of music, is offered through this 13-track musical odyssey. You have top-notch songwriting, the most larger-than-life, grandiose production out there, and binding these aspects together. Performances from both the long list of legendary artists who deliver all-time great features, and most importantly, Kanye himself, who puts his heart and soul into every single word spoken on this album. On multiple tracks, Kanye was able to rebirth that same infectious hunger that we fell in love with on The College Dropout and show it to us in ways not just through his verses and vocals, but through the soul-touching production on this album, which reaches heights and stratospheres that nobody has been able to top since its release. Now, I could go on to praise each track here individually, breaking them down for all of their sonic and lyrical genius, but since this video is already so long, I really don't think much else has to be said about why My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy belongs at number 2 on this list, and finally, at number 1, coming in as the best record to ever take home Best Rap Album at the Grammys, we got Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. Now, when it comes to Kendrick Lamar's iconic third studio album, this is an album that gets every single thing right and then takes it and evolves it to the next level. This beast of an LP is a multi-layered, multifaceted concept album that explores the conventions of hip-hop and in the greater scale the world in ways that completely revamped and set a new bar for how rap albums of any magnitude should be made. I am not overstating this. Each song on this album can have an entire dedicated college course to understanding its full meaning, as many of the tracks are so layered that even after almost a decade of being out, we are still peeling off layers of Kendrick's words, and if you're hearing this and thinking that this album does all of this at the expense of the rapping and music, To Pimp a Butterfly is one of the only modern rap albums that can even be echoed in the same sentence with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy in terms of production, and Kendrick Lamar's not career-defining but life-fulfilling performance doesn't just make for one of the most well-thought-out across any medium, but it also makes for one of the most entertaining, as we still see him do everything from tear up tracks with his unpredictable, scorching flows to throwing shots at the industry, public figures, and even rappers like Drake. The way Kendrick is able to pack so much detail, both lyrically and sonically, into this album is wondrous, and the sheer scope of emotions and ideas that he's able to play with across the span of this record make it a project that is just as human and imperfect as it is well thought out and conceptual. I'm frustrated with myself because I feel like saying all of this doesn't even say enough, and if I really want to give this album justice, it deserves an entire dedicated video, but for all of the reasons that I have said, for the pure artistic masterclass that To Pimp a Butterfly puts on. It is the best project to ever take home Best Rap Album at the Grammys, and remember, an album this mind-blowing still couldn't get Kendrick an Album of the Year win, and with all of this out of the way, there you have it. There is every single Grammy-winning rap album ranked from worst to best, and wow. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As you can see, while the Grammys have picked some horrible albums to take home this award, they have at least gotten a good amount right, but still, when you actually know why a lot of these albums were picked in the first place, it feels very disingenuous, and if you want to see why that is, just check out my video on why the Grammys hate Travis Scott.